All right, let's dive into this one. We've gotten a ton of requests to unpack Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Oh, yeah. It's super popular.
So we're going to really break it down today. We're going to extract those golden nuggets that are going to help you build better habits, ready to unlock your full potential.
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So Clear's book is packed with insights, but one of the things that really stood out to me was this idea that tiny changes can have a massive impact over time.
Yeah, he really emphasizes the power of small changes. It's not about making these huge, sweeping changes. It's about those little consistent actions that compound over time.
Exactly. He uses a really cool analogy about heating an ice cube.
Oh, yeah.
You can spend the whole day trying to melt an ice cube at 25 degrees. You wouldn't see any change.
Right.
It'd just be frozen solid.
Yeah.
But all that work you're putting in isn't wasted.
Yeah.
It's it's being stored up.
It is.
Then bam, you hit 32 degrees and suddenly that ice cube transforms into water.
That's the magic moment.
Yeah. It's that crucial shift. Clear calls this the plateau of latent potential. And I think it's so important to remember because so many of us give up on new habits before we reach that breakthrough point.
Yeah, we get discouraged because we don't see those immediate results.
Totally. I know. I've definitely been guilty of that.
Me too.
You start a new workout routine or a diet or whatever, and you don't see the results right away. So you just kind of forget it.
Right. It's easy to fall into that trap.
So what can we do to kind of stay motivated during that period where we're putting in the work but not seeing the results? How do we stay on track?
One thing that can be really helpful is using a visual tracker.
Oh, yeah, like a habit tracker.
Exactly. Whether it's an app on your phone or a simple calendar or even just moving paper clips from one jar to another like Clear suggests.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Just seeing that tangible representation of your progress can be really motivating. It reminds you of how far you've come and keeps you focused on that long game.
It's a visual reminder that you're making progress even when it doesn't feel like it.
Absolutely. And speaking of the long game, Clear introduces this really interesting idea about the link between habits and identity.
Ooh, tell me about that.
He says every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
Wow.
It's a powerful way to think about habit change.
Yeah, it's not just about doing something, it's about becoming someone.
Exactly. So if you want to change your habits, you need to start by changing how you see yourself.
So instead of saying, I'm trying to quit smoking, you say, I'm a non-smoker.
Exactly. That subtle shift in identity can make a huge difference. It's like you're aligning your actions with your desired self-image.
I love that. It's like you're stepping into that role.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got this new identity in mind. You're fired up and ready to build some awesome habits. What's the next step? How do we actually make those habits stick?
Well, Claire breaks down habit formation into 4 stages: cue, craving, response, and reward. Think of it like a recipe for a habit.
Okay, I'm listening.
So the cue is the trigger that sets things in motion. It could be anything. Your phone buzzing, seeing a certain commercial, or even just feeling bored.
It's like that initial spark that gets the ball rolling.
Yeah. Then comes the craving. This is the motivational force behind the habit, that desire for the reward.
And this is where dopamine comes in, right? I've heard dopamine plays a huge role, but to be honest, I don't really understand how it all works.
It's pretty fascinating stuff. So dopamine is this neurotransmitter in our brains. It's associated with pleasure and reward.
Okay.
So whenever we do something that feels good, our brain releases dopamine, and that reinforces the behavior, making us want to do it again.
Oh, that makes sense. So the craving is all about anticipating that dopamine hit.
Right.
Okay, so what happens next?
After the craving comes the response, which is the actual habit itself, the action you take. So that could be anything from grabbing a snack to scrolling through social media to going for a run.
Right, and then finally we have the reward, the payoff that makes it all worthwhile.
Exactly. The reward is what reinforces the entire cycle. It could be that taste of your favorite food, the feeling of accomplishment after a workout, or even just the temporary escape from boredom.
And as you said, even just the anticipation of that reward, that little dopamine spike, can be incredibly motivating.
Definitely.
Clear talks about this crazy experiment with mice, right?
Oh, yeah, the one where they poke a box hundreds of times an hour.
Yeah. They're so driven by dopamine that they'll keep poking that box, even if it means missing out on food and water.
It highlights just how much our brains are wired to seek out rewards, even if they're small.
And that's where his idea of temptation bundling comes in, right?
Exactly. It's like hacking our dopamine system to make those need-to-dos more appealing.
So you're basically pairing something you need to do with something you want to do.
Right. I only let myself watch my favorite TV show while I'm on the treadmill.
That's so smart. I should try that.
It works. You can also try things like listening to audiobooks while you're doing chores, or rewarding yourself with a relaxing bath after you finish a work project.
Okay, so we're making those habits more attractive. But what about our environment? Does that play a role too?
Absolutely. Our surroundings have a huge impact on our habits.
It's like our environment is constantly sending us cues, right?
Yeah, Clear says what we see influences what we do.
He talks about those urinal fly stickers, right? How something as simple as a little sticker can influence people's behavior.
Yeah, that's a funny example, but it shows how even small visual cues can have a big impact.
So instead of relying solely on willpower, we can actually design our environment to make good habits easier and bad habits harder.
Right. Like if you're trying to eat healthier, keep healthy snacks visible and put the junk food out of sight. If you're trying to cut back on social media, delete the apps from your phone or use a website blocker.
Make it easy to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing.
Exactly. It's about creating that path of least resistance for the habits you want to build. Now, when it comes to breaking bad habits, it can be really helpful to change your environment altogether.
Oh yeah, like that thing with the Vietnam War veterans who are addicted to heroin.
Right. When they came home, most of them just stopped using. Their environment changed, their triggers were gone, and their habits changed along with it.
It's amazing how powerful that shift in context can be.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about making good habits more appealing, bad habits less tempting, changing our environment. But sometimes even with all that, getting started can feel really overwhelming.
It can.
Like you should do something, but you just can't seem to muster up the motivation. Any tips for overcoming that initial resistance?
Clear has this great tool for that, the 2-minute rule.
2-minute rule. I've never heard of that.
It's all about making habits so easy that you can't say no. You take any habit, no matter how big or daunting, and break it down into a 2-minute version.
So like, how would that work?
Okay, so read before bed becomes read 1 page. Go to the gym becomes put on your workout clothes.
Ah, I get it.
The idea is that you just start, you build that momentum. Once you've taken that first tiny step, it's much easier to keep going.
I love that. It's about outsmarting your own resistance by tricking yourself into taking action.
It is.
So simple, yet so effective. Okay, so we've taken that first step. We're building momentum. But how do we stay motivated in the long run? Like, how do we track our progress and make sure we're actually sticking with these new habits? Clear talks a lot about habit tracking, right?
He does. Having a visual representation of your progress can be incredibly motivating.
Yeah, it's like a tangible reminder of your commitment.
You can use those fancy habit tracking apps or just keep it simple with a calendar or a journal, or even just move paper clips from one jar to another like Clear suggests. Whatever works for you.
But it's not just about blindly checking boxes, right?
Right. It's not about being perfect or hitting every single target. It's about being consistent and focusing on the bigger picture.
So don't get too caught up in the numbers.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Celebrate those small wins and focus on building that identity you want.
That's such a great point. It's about enjoying the journey, not just focusing on the destination. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, but I'm curious about something. What if you need like an extra boost of accountability? What if you're someone who needs a little extra push to stay on track?
Well, in that case, Clear talks about the power of a habit contract.
Okay, what's that?
It's a way to add an immediate pause to those bad habits and increase your accountability.
Oh, interesting. So tell me more about it.
He gives this great example of an entrepreneur, Brian Harris, who used a habit contract to reach his weight loss goals.
Yeah.
Harris made a contract with his wife and his personal trainer outlining his specific goals and the consequences for missing those goals.
Like what kind of consequences?
Things like financial penalties, having to wear a rival team's hat, stuff like that.
Wow, that's hardcore.
Yeah.
But I guess it worked.
It did.
Yeah.
It just shows the power of accountability. Sometimes we need that extra layer of commitment to really push ourselves. It could be finding an accountability partner, joining a support group, or creating a habit contract like Harris. There are lots of ways to increase your chances of success.
So it's all about setting ourselves up for success, right? Not just relying on willpower alone. Now, here's something I've been wondering about. We all have our own unique strengths and weaknesses, right? So how do we find those habits that are really going to work for us as individuals? Like, how do we know which habits to focus on?
That's a great question, and that's actually what we're going to dive into next.
Okay, so we've talked about making habits appealing and like breaking bad ones and changing our environment and all that. But, we all have our own strengths and weaknesses, right?
Absolutely.
Like, are some people just better at building habits than others?
It's a great question, and Clear actually dives into how our genes and personalities can predispose us to certain strengths,
Oh, wow.
Making us more likely to excel in certain areas.
So it's not just about willpower. There's a biological component to it.
There is, but it's not about determinism or anything.
Okay,
It's
good.
more about understanding yourself, your natural inclinations, and finding those activities where you have a higher chance of success.
So like if you're naturally introverted, you might find it easier to build habits around solitary activities.
Exactly, like writing or coding.
Right.
Whereas someone who's more extroverted might thrive in group settings.
Yeah, like group fitness classes or something.
Right. It's about finding what works for you.
So how do we figure out where our natural advantages lie?
Cleara talks about the explore-exploit trade-off.
The what?
Explore-exploit trade-off.
Okay.
It's a concept from behavioral psychology that basically means early on in life we should spend time exploring.
Exploring.
Yeah, trying new things, experimenting, and kind of seeing what sticks.
Like trying on different hats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once we've identified those areas where we have an advantage,
Right.
Those things we enjoy and excel at, then we shift to exploit.
So we exploit those areas where we're most likely to succeed.
Exactly. We double down on those strengths and really hone our skills.
So it's about finding your sweet spot where your talents and interests align.
Exactly. And that's where habit building becomes almost effortless. You're working with your strengths, not against them.
Okay, so we've built some solid habits, but let's be real.
Yeah.
There are going to be days when we just don't feel like showing up.
Definitely.
So what separates the people who stick with their habits from those who fall off track?
Well, Clear talks about the importance of showing up even when you don't feel like it.
Easier said than done, right?
It is. He tells the story about an Olympic coach who said that even the best athletes experience a lack of motivation.
Oh, really? Even Olympians?
Even Olympians. The difference is professionals still show up.
They push through it.
They do. It's that commitment to consistency, that discipline that sets them apart.
So it's about mastering those mundane moments.
Yes, those days when it feels like a chore. Because that's what builds the foundation for lasting change.
It's about building that identity of someone who shows up, someone who gets things done.
Absolutely.
Okay, but how do we make it easier to stick with those habits, especially when they become routine?
That's where things like variable rewards can be really helpful.
Variable rewards, what are those?
It's basically incorporating some unpredictability into your routine. It's like the excitement of finding a $20 bill in your pocket or getting an unexpected bonus at work.
Oh, I get it. So you're talking about spicing things up a bit to keep that motivation going.
Yeah, those unexpected rewards release dopamine, making the activity more exciting and engaging.
So how do we do that with our habits?
Lots of ways. If you're a runner, you can try different routes or playlists. If you're working on a creative project, you can experiment with new techniques.
I see. So it's about keeping those habits from becoming boring.
Yeah, exactly. That element of surprise can help reignite that motivation and make it easier to stick with your habits long term.
And don't forget to celebrate those wins along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
It's really motivating to recognize those little victories.
It is.
Okay, this has been super insightful. I love how much science goes into something we often take for granted.
Me too.
Now, before we wrap up, I'm curious, what are your personal favorite takeaways from Atomic Habits?
Let me think.
I love that idea, like gamifying your routine. But even with the best strategies, sometimes we hit those like inevitable bumps in the road.
Yeah, that happens.
So how do we like course correct when things aren't going as planned? What happens when we fall off track?
Clear is a big advocate for reflection,
Okay.
like regularly taking a step back and analyzing your habits.
Like a performance review for our habits.
Exactly. He actually highlights a program used by the Los Angeles Lakers.
Oh, wow.
It's called Career Best Effort.
Okay.
And they basically tracked and analyzed every aspect of the player's performance.
So even elite athletes at the top of their game are constantly looking for ways to improve.
They are. It's about always striving to be better.
So it's not like a set it and forget it kind of thing.
No, you got to stay engaged.
We need to stay engaged and like make adjustments along the way.
You do. You have to ask yourself, like, what went well this week? What could have gone better? What did I learn?
It's almost like having a coach in our back pocket,
Yes.
guiding us towards continuous improvement.
I like that. And it ties back to that idea of identity that we talked about.
Correct.
By consistently reflecting and refining our habits, we're not just improving our performance.
Yeah.
We're shaping who we are.
We're literally building ourselves habit by habit. I find that so empowering.
It is empowering. So before we wrap up, I'm curious,
Yeah.
what stood out to you from Atomic Habits? What really resonated?
I think what surprised me the most was how much of habit formation is about mindset.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's not just about like gritting your teeth and powering through. It's
Yeah.
about understanding the science behind how our brains work.
Mm.
And then using that knowledge to like create systems that set us up for success.
I completely agree with that. It's about working with our brains, not against them.
Totally.
Yeah.
So if someone is listening right now and they're ready to start building better habits, what's the one piece of advice you would give them?
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, I think it's important to remember that it's not just about achieving a specific goal.
Yeah.
It's about becoming the best version of yourself. James Clear puts it really well when he says, it's not about having something, it's about becoming someone.
Oh, that's good. I love that quote.
Yeah, it's powerful.
So it's not about the destination. It's about the journey and who we become along the way.
Exactly. So embrace the process. Be patient with yourself and keep showing up. Those small actions will add up over time.
That's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much for walking us through Atomic Habits. It's been super insightful.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy talking about this stuff.
And to everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive and that you're feeling inspired to start building those habits that'll help you become the best version of yourself. Happy habit building.